first scrimmage this weekend, and it's a big deal. I think about something that Brandon Adams said where you want to hear good news because no news technically means bad news. I think that applies to the first person, which I mean is the absolute obvious, in Gunner Stockton. You don't want it to be a Tennessee situation where they're having to blur out him throwing an interception, or, you know, a Nessmeyer or Lagway situation where it looks like it could be kind of injury related. So with Gunnar Stockton, that's the obvious one. You want to hear help, and you want to hear that he's made progress because he's the quarterback of this team, and it all starts with him.
Good news and good vibes for Gunnar coming out of this first scrimmage. He's going to be Georgia's starting quarterback this year. And we have heard and consistently seen great things from Gunnar in practice thus far this year. He's doing the things that they want to. I think the thing that I'm interested with the scrimmage, and we heard Mike Bobo touch on this a little bit yesterday, when you are someone like Gunnar who wants to extend plays, he wants to get everything he possibly can out of a play, you open yourself up to more hits. Now, you can't really train for that because of the way that Georgia does not contact quarterbacks in a scrimmage. But I'll be interested in seeing how does Gunnar sort of maybe rein that in a little bit and find the balance between extending plays with his legs, making plays out of the pocket, occasionally using his legs to pick up runs and first downs, while also not leaving open the possibility that you have a repeat of the Texas game where his helmet gets knocked off, and while he was very fortunate to be able to recover from that, you take enough of those hits, you're not always going to get back up. So how Gunnar does in that regard, I'm very interested coming out of this first scrimmage.
Also on the offensive side of the ball, and we touched on Noah Thomas last week, but with him being the tallest of the group, you want to hear good things coming out about him. I mean, I think you could honestly put the wide receiver room in this entire category just based upon how last year went, but he was one of the biggest players that Georgia brought in from the transfer portal, and you want to make sure that that talent isn't going to waste and that he's actually going to add value to the room. So you definitely want to hear something about Noah Thomas coming out of Saturday.
Yeah, to start fall camp, I don't know that there's been a player that has generated more consistent buzz than Noah Thomas, and you want to see him bring that and back that up at the scrimmage on Saturday there. So if he's able to go out and play well once again, I think that should only further excite what he can bring to this team. We heard Mike Bobo this week talk about Colby Young and what he brings to the table, and if Georgia's able to have both those guys after not really having a true physical outside wide receiver a season ago, we talked about making things easier for Gunnar Stockton. Having a Noah Thomas and having a Colby Young as reliable contributors, I think is going to make life much, much easier for the Georgia quarterback.
And I think that we can speak for our coworker here, Jeff Santel, that there's no person that wants to hear better things about Noah Thomas than Jeff, because he's put in all the stock. This one, I could guess you could say that this one's almost for the fans too, and that's Ellis Robinson. I feel like we haven't heard that much about him, and part of that I feel like is on purpose because everybody knows that Ellis is this fan favorite and he's got this really high expectation to live up to, but he's also playing behind some guys, so I feel like maybe Georgia has kind of kept his name quiet on purpose. But if he has a really good scrimmage, then the word is definitely going to get out, because the people that are going to be allowed at that scrimmage are the important ones, and they're going to want that information to get out. And just based on the fact that we haven't heard that much, I think it's important for all of DawgNation to hear some sort of update on the progress that Ellis has made.
Yeah, as we sit here today on August 7th, I don't anticipate Ellis Robinson to be Georgia's starting cornerback against Marshall. Now, that doesn't mean he's not going to play. That doesn't mean that Georgia's not going to have a plan for him to make an impact on this team. But I think there's a gap right now between Daniel Harris and Ellis Robinson. And so Ellis, look, he might be Georgia's best pure cover corner out there, and I think they're going to find ways to get him out there in obvious passing situations. But if he's going to want to be an every down contributor like I think he knows he can be, he's got to become more physical. He's got to do a better job against the run. If he's able to do that, and I think this scrimmage is going to be a great test for him in that regard, that's how you start to see him get more time on the playing field. And while I'm actually going to even go hyper-specific here, I don't necessarily want to hear about Ellis Robinson having a pass breakup or Ellis Robinson coming down with an interception in coverage. I want to hear Ellis Robinson was doing a great job covering the flats, making things difficult, being a physical defender, because if he's doing that, that's how he gets on the field in a consistent role this fall, more so than just what he does defending passes when he's targeted.
So we're going to stick with the defensive side of the ball here. We're going to go to Quintavius Johnson, similar to like the Noah Thomas wide receiver situation. At this point, I feel like you just want to hear something positive about the edge and outside linebacker room in general. And having watched Quintavius Johnson in high school, you could tell that there was a lot of natural talent and potential, but he definitely needed a lot of polishing and then probably some time to just mature as a person and an athlete. And so within that room, I think a lot of people are expecting to hear stuff about Ella Madozie, but don't forget Quintavius Johnson when it comes to this practice. And I do feel good about the fact that we're going to walk away having heard something about him.
Yeah, Quintavius Johnson is slowly becoming one of the more interesting players on this Georgia defense. I think he benefited tremendously this spring by being out there when Gabe Harris could not. I think Georgia's going to move Gabe Harris around. He's going to play on the defensive line. He's going to play some outside linebacker. And right now, Quintavius Johnson is ahead of Ella Madozie in terms of being an every down outside linebacker. Madozie brings a lot from a pass rushing standpoint. But let's remember, he just got here, and there are going to be things in the run game that Madozie is just not yet quite comfortable doing. And so for Quintavius Johnson, if he's going to want to be a big contributor this year and more consistent contributor in his second year, he's got to have a really strong second scrimmage. And specifically at that outside linebacker position, I think he's the guy that if you're looking for positive words to come out about, it's going to be him, because I don't quite yet know if that's where Ella Madozie is in his development at Georgia.
So we'll wrap it up with Zion Branch. We've talked a lot about Zachariah, and I think there was a viral clip of Zachariah from practice the other day. But when it comes to Zion, when Georgia brought in those 3 transfers that could help in that safety room, at this point I think you want to hear about one of them in particular, just someone outside of KJ, Janelle, or Ja'Cory. But when we walk away from Saturday hearing stuff, I think the thing I want to hear about Zion is that they used him in multiple positions, because even though he is a little bit smaller, I think that gives him some versatility to be able to play safety or in that star position. So I want to hear that they use Zion Branch in multiple ways, because I think that's the difference between him and the other transfers that they brought in.
Yeah, it sounds like of the transfer defensive backs that they brought in, Zion Branch, Adrian Maddox, and Jaden Harris, sounds like Maddox and Branch are maybe the best position to contribute right away at Georgia. Maddox is going to be a one-and-done guy, whereas Branch has multiple years of eligibility remaining. And look, Ja'Cory Thomas is going to be starting week 1 opposite KJ Bolden, but by the time that Tennessee game rolls around, by the time Alabama comes to Athens at the end of September, I'll be very interested in seeing what kind of a role Branch has been able to carve out for himself. Got a chance to go through spring. Physically speaking, he stands out in that secondary with the size that he brings to that position. And so if he's able to get some of the mental things there, that gives Georgia another very, very good athlete in that back secondary to pair with KJ Bolden, who I think by the end of the season has a chance to be an All-American level safety.
So one really quick note before we move on. Yesterday was Coordinator Day, where all the Georgia coordinators came out to speak. You can find all of those videos on our DawgNation YouTube page, but I think the one that everybody was anticipating the most was the one from Mike Bobo. Connor and I did a full recap of that yesterday with some of the most important sound bites, so you can also find that on our DawgNation YouTube page. And while you're there, go ahead and subscribe to our channel and ring the bell. That way you get notifications anytime that DawgNation posts. So if you want to catch up on all the things that the coordinators said, then check out our DawgNation YouTube page.